Woman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I want to say thank you to Mr. Fitzpatrick for co-sponsoring this amendment and for his leadership as the chairman of the task force to investigate terrorism financing. Thank you also to Chairman Nunes and Ranking for supporting this important amendment. The purpose of the bipartisan Sinema-Fitzpatrick amendment is to choke off the Islamic State's revenue stream. Our amendment directs the intelligence community to detect, deter, and degrade Islamic State's revenue sources and to report on the strategy and resources needed for success. The Islamic State is one of the world's most violent and dangerous terrorist groups. Its goals, to build a caliphate in the Middle East and encourage attacks in Europe and the United States, represent a new threat to our country and to global stability. ISIL is also believed to be the richest terrorist organization in history, controlling a huge territory in Iraq and Syria containing significant oil resources. In 2014, the Islamic State generated approximately $1 million per day through the sale of smuggled oil, extortion, and kidnapping for ransom. U.S. strikes have reportedly diminished ISIL's oil revenues, but the breadth of this terrorist organization's funding sources represents a serious challenge to our national security. A February report by the Financial Action Task Force estimated that ISIL now largely finances itself through extortion in the territory it controls, and another study places this extortion revenue at $360 million per year. In Iraq, ISIL levies a 5% tax on all withdrawals from banks, and the organization also gains tens of millions of dollars from kidnapping on an annual basis. To defeat ISIL and protect our country, we must cut off the Islamic State's diverse and substantial sources of revenue. I encourage my colleagues to support this common-sense bipartisan amendment. Mr. Chair, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Does someone claim time in opposition?
Mr. Chair, I claim time in opposition, although I do not intend to oppose the amendment. And at this time, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the chairman and thank my colleague, Ms. Sinema, for her work on this important amendment and for her work as well in the task force established to investigate terrorism financing. Today, the terror threat faced by our nation and our intelligence community is more diverse and sophisticated than it has ever been before. Organizations like Hezbollah, ISIS, and Boko Haram can no longer simply be considered terrorist groups. They've grown into much more dangerous entities, ones with the abilities to self-finance their actions through means far beyond traditional methods, from illicit oil sales and human trafficking to regional taxation and antiquities dealing. In order to effectively combat such evolved threats, U.S. policy must also evolve. As chair of the bipartisan task force to investigate terrorism financing, established by the Committee on Financial Services, I've worked with lawmakers and policy experts to guarantee the U.S. response to terror's new revenue streams are quickly and effectively choked out. This amendment is important to ensure each level of our government, from Congress to the intelligence community, has identified the problem as well as potential weaknesses and is ready to address the threats that we face. By both expressing the sense of Congress that our intelligence agencies must dedicate resources to eradicate terror revenue mechanisms, as well as report to relevant committees on their strategies, this amendment strengthens the underlying bill and Congress's understanding of our global response to terrorism. The threat to freedom and democracy posed by Islamic State and groups like it circles the globe, and the United States can ill afford to combat these enemies on the battlefield alone. Any strategy against terror groups worldwide must attack not only militarily, but at their funding source. Organizations, no matter how complex, cannot effectively function without requisite resources. Mr. Speaker, our intelligence community is second to none, and I'm certain that together we can formulate and carry out long-term solutions to combat terror financing. I thank the chairman for his leadership on this issue and Ms. Sinema for authoring this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.